Today's question is, what are my options when it comes to toilets in my tiny house? Now, toilets is not exactly a topic that anyone gets really excited about, or at least no one I know, but I think there are a lot of questions about it. When we have a workshop, it seems like people skirt around the issue, and then all of a sudden someone will ask a question about them, and then it becomes a real hot topic. Everybody's got a question. So I think like I said, there's a lot of people that want to know, but then they don't necessarily want to ask. So when it comes to a toilet in a tiny house, you really have three different options. You've got a flushable toilet, you've got a composting toilet, and you've got an incinerator toilet. Now, a flushable toilet is just like the toilet that 99% of people have in their houses. It's a toilet that brings water in, and then when you're done using it, you flush it, and the water and the waste leave your house. Now, when it leaves your house, it goes to usually one of two places. It goes to either a septic system, which is a system that's buried in your yard, which dissipates the waste, or it goes to a city sewer system, which basically goes out to a pipe, takes the waste down to a treatment plant, and then they process the sewage, the waste. Now, so to use that type of toilet, you really have to have access to one of those two systems. Now, you can install a septic system if you don't have one, but they're pretty expensive. But if you do have access to one of those two systems, that's probably going to be the easiest option for you. It's something that everyone's familiar with. It's very low maintenance, very low work. So if you have access to that, that's probably going to be your best bet. The next two types are more common in an off-grid system where you don't have access to a waste system or you don't want to put in your own septic system. So the first type is a composting toilet. And a composting toilet, there's different types of those. There's a DIY version, which is almost free to make. There's a commercial version, which is a little bit nicer, which costs around $700 or $800, and everything in between. So a composting toilet, there's as I said, there's not only DIY and commercial versions, but there's also different types. The most common type is a urine diverted system. So that means that the liquid waste and the solid waste are kept separate. The urine waste is emptied frequently. The solid waste is treated with a compost material, and it composts in place, and so it doesn't need to be addressed or emptied. Some manufacturers say up to 60 uses. So it's not something you deal with every day. It's just something that's there. I've never personally used one, and I know there's kind of an ick factor when you start, thinking about compost and it's sitting there and all that stuff. But I've talked to a lot of people that have used them, and they say it's actually not disgusting at all. There's no odor. When you actually empty it, the compost material at that point has the consistency and the smell of dirt. So it's not nearly as bad as your imagination. I mean, I'm sure when you're thinking of a composting toilet, if you've not used one, your imagination is running wild, and you're like, this is not going to be for me. But it's definitely a viable option. The third option is an incinerator toilet, and an incinerator toilet uses heat to basically destroy and turn your waste, your liquid and your solid waste, into ash. It's I think per use it's about a teaspoon of ash, and that ash is sterile. So you can dispose of it any way you want. You can dispose of it outside or just in the trash can. There's nothing special about it. Since it uses heat, it has to have a power source. So there's some that are electric, and then there's some that run on a fuel, be it propane, kerosene, diesel. If you're going to be off-grid, which is normally the reason people are using these things, then perhaps an electrical one may not be as suitable, because if you're off-grid, you may not have access to electrical. Now, electrical is a lot easier to get than waste. So like if you're out behind someone's house really far, you can run an extension cord really far. You can't run a waste line as far. Waste line has to be sloping down. There's some tricks to that. So you could still use an electric incinerator toilet, even though you're semi off-grid. If you're completely off-grid, then you're probably going to be wanting to look at a propane version. Now, as far as reliability, I have heard that there are some issues with incinerator toilets. They can fail, and they require a lot more maintenance. There's a lot more going on in them. Whereas a compost toilet, there's really nothing happening there. I mean, there's the Nature's Head has like a little hand crank to stir things up to mix the compost material together. But there's a little fan, a little electric fan, but really nothing too mechanical going on. So those are very, very reliable. The incinerator not as reliable, and then obviously a flushable toilet, very reliable as well. You rarely have a problem with those. So anyways, depending on your situation, be it off-grid, on-grid, access to power, you know, all the different things that go into this decision that I just laid out will play into which toilet you decide is right for your tiny house.